Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Kevin St. Clergy, a successful entrepreneur and former agency owner who experienced consistent growth for nearly 2 decades before achieving a transformational, life-changing exit. Kevin built an exceptional agency, really focusing on strategic partnerships, quality team, and great service to clients, and was able to sell it without client contracts. Now, he's a seasoned speaker, author of a book, Beyond Blind Blaming, which we touch into, a mastermind leader, and someone who is passionate about giving and guiding entrepreneurs towards greater clarity and growth. In this episode, we dive into kind of the unconventional strategies behind his agency, key insights that you as entrepreneurs can use to enhance your journey and get to a similar end outcome, and critical advice for business owners who want to achieve impactful exits. You don't want to miss out, so let's dive in. So let's dive in. Kevin, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
You are the quintessential agency owner type. I don't want to label you, but your origin story and how you got to where you are is something that a lot of people are going to relate to. So run us through it.
Yeah, so I went to school for the medical field, and we started doing some consulting in the medical field for the company that I was working for. I had run my own clinics, and then they kind of promoted me and put me in a different division where I would actually go out and help other medical practices be more successful. This was in the early 2000s, though, so the internet was just getting started, especially in some of the medical fields. We were a little behind the rest of the world when it came to the internet. In fact, I kept hearing things like, I don't think patients are online in my area. And I was like, well, I think you're wrong. And then when I left to go start a digital marketing company, I was shocked at how many people told me, well, you're going to fail. There's no way that people will ever use the internet for this particular field. And I'm like, wow, I'm already seeing it, but I did it anyway. So I left a $250,000 job to start a company on the internet. We actually started as an education company. I developed a public education seminar that we put into Flash technology. I'm dating myself a little bit here. That's no longer allowed to work on Chrome or anything else. I guess viruses are pasted in there, whatever. But I just wanted to be an education company. And I did get some advice from a mentor of mine at the time and just said, look, if you can get a bunch of people to pay a little bit of money every month, you can pretty easily replace your corporate income. So we did it. We developed this $40,000 video. We leased it to medical practice owners for $50 a month. We quickly got up to about 180 or so users. The money was coming in. I was like, well, this is cool. And then people started asking me, well, this is great, Kevin. I've got an incredible video on a crappy website. Can you help me do websites? And we were like, well, I guess I got to find some people that can help me with that. So came back and said, yeah, we can do that. Found a partner that was building it. We kind of partnered together. And then I found a copywriter to write good copy. So we had decent copy and got people to take action. And then we had a great video and a great website. And then as soon as we launched their website, guess what? Why isn't my website number 1 on Google? Well, we just launched it yesterday, but let me see what I can do. So we started doing that. And then, of course, we got into being a full-fledged agency over the next, we had the agency for about 17, 18 years before I officially sold it. I ended up bringing on a partner and some other things we've talked about. I'm sure we'll get to later, but that's kind of my origin story. I had no plans of being an agency owner.
Or an entrepreneur, it sounds like, even at that.
Entrepreneur, yeah, because it was interesting because at the time, so back then, after about a year of doing it, I was getting a little frustrated. People kept telling me this isn't going to work. And so I wrote a book and the book took off. And I was making about $3,000 a month selling the book. I was like, well, this is cool. My first successful book in a very micro niche, medical field. And I was actually able to hire Russell Brunson. Do you know who that is?
Yep.
So I joined Russell Brunson's coaching group when it was $5,500.
That was even before it was called Inner Circle, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, this wasn't Inner Circle. This was just a coaching program that he had. So I got to fly up and he taught me a lot about SEO and things like that, but I got 45 minutes with him. And in that 45-minute session, he said, listen, this book is great and I think you should give it away for free.
Please tell us that.
And I said, no. I mean, I spent a year writing this, forget it. And he's like, Kevin, at the time we had just gotten started. He's like, Kevin, you're doing what, $100,000 a year? I did $6 million this year. Now he's a billionaire, of course. And I'm in his inner circle, which feels pretty good because it's kind of neat for us to connect 20 years later. We both kind of made it in our own little ways. But I said, all right, I'll do it. And, that next year we went from like 100 to 400 and we grew from there. Turned into a very large agency with 450 clients and 900 locations that we were doing marketing for.
Before we transition to the story of the agency, I find it fascinating that you are niche by your origin story. So you studied medical, you were in the medical practice field, and so you are an expert in the domain that you are servicing. Do you feel that made it easier for you than
I think
others
it made
who?
it a lot easier for me because people would say, you do what I do for a living. And just so the audience knows, I'm not allowed to say what profession we were in. You can probably look it up and find it, but that was the guidelines I was given. So yeah, they said, since you're doing this, I trust you more. It was instant credibility and instant trust. And all of my mentors at the same. So there's two people that I called first and second when I sold the agency. Russell Brunson was the first guy that I called to tell him thank you and what had happened. The next guy was David Fry. He's kind of an old school. He was kind of Russell's mentor at the time. And we just happened to connect because he used to do the same thing that I was doing in the spa industry. And he always told me, Kevin, as much as you think you want to go wide and get as many different fields as you can, I'm going to highly recommend that you go deep and go as deep as you can in that medical field. And we did. We started doing practice development as a value add. We even started helping people sell their practices if they wanted to sell their practices, because we found that one of our number one ways we were losing customers is when people were being bought. So I was like, well, I think I can control that process and help them in the process and make a little money. And we were able to help them exit successfully at a higher dollar amount than most brokers would get, but also get them in touch with some partners who liked us as well. So it worked out really well. And many times I would waive the fee if they wouldn't mind that I would take them to a partner that works with us. And so they felt that was ethical in their minds. I was like, listen, I don't want to, double dip or get in trouble, but I do want to sell your practice. You'll get top dollar. And this is somebody that still works for us. And then guess what? They would sing our praises. And the number one reason we're here is because of Kevin and his group. So you made a wise choice. So they would resell our big partners on staying with them.
Fantastic. When did you go from solo to bring on your business partner, Charlie, right?
Yep. Charlie was a good friend of mine. He was actually my original business coach when we started. And then about 6 years went by, and then we had kind of shared a bookkeeper, and I was like, I'm not doing as well as I wanted to. I'm not growing as quickly as I can. I'm starting to struggle a little bit. And the bookkeeper's like, you should talk to Charlie. I think you've gotten a little bigger than you think. And, Charlie and I connected, and he's like, well, that's the stuff that I love to do. He said, what do you love to do? Which I think is a brilliant question. Before you take on a partner is divide up the things you love to do, and then it'll be a lot easier. We had a wonderful partnership. Everybody told me not to do it. I ended up giving him half the equity at no cost. And
you had already been running the business for a period of time to date. So you had already been in business. So you gave him,
I'd been in business.
You gave him half a company.
5 or 6 years. Yeah. And we were doing well. And I gave him half the company because what we did was we did a test. I tested. I didn't just give it to him like, hey, here you go. We worked together on a commission basis. I was like, well, show me what you can do, which is something that's interesting because I don't know if anybody that's listening has ever read the book called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Incredible book. And what he recommends is before you hire people, give them a test. And didn't realize it at the time, but that's what I did with Charlie. And in 90 days, he showed some significant improvement in some of the things that we were doing and some of the ideas that he had. So to me, it was a no-brainer. Even though nobody told me to do it, we ended up growing the business 5 times. But anyway, you had asked what happened, how long before. It's about 5 or 6 years. And when I started to bring on some employees, I got my first big contract. We were going to be the digital marketing agency behind a very large group that had a lot of independent owners that were part of a group for buying power and things like that. And they had read my book, another reason to write a book. And they said, look, you're the type of person that we want to do this, but we want to private label it. And I said, fine. And we grew it pretty quickly, which gave me the money to bring on Charlie and grow it to the next level. And it was really cool. But in about 2 or 3 years after that, the deal that we had struck, although it was, I think, 50% of my revenue at the time, it was 90% of my support tickets. And of course, they got to a certain size. I was like, I wonder how much longer they're going to be paying me this money. And I remember sitting there like it was yesterday. It was like the day after my birthday, and I might have had a little wine before. So I remember still being in bed when I answered the phone. And it was my buddy Matt saying, hey, look, this day was coming, but we're going to pull this in-house. We're going to honor our agreement. We're going to give you 3 to 6 months to kind of tailor it out so it don't just take you off guard. But it ended up being the best thing because when they were gone and all the support tickets went away, we were able to provide a much higher level of service and support for our clients. The buzz, we had that income replaced within about 6 to 8 months, and we never looked back. And so it was a good lesson for me. Watch the big contracts that look really cool up front, because they will suck the life out of you.
Yeah. And we had discussed in our prep that you didn't create the business with the intention to sell it. You are very much on delivery, value to the client, service, prioritizing the market first, not really building yet. When did you make that shift to, hey, this is becoming something that's more than just me giving everything I have to these clients?
Yeah. So we, and actually, I tell the story in my new book, shameless plug here.
Shameless plug, do it.
Famous plug. Beyond Blind Blaming is my new book. Blind Blaming is where you think you know what the problem is. So you start blaming something, you go to work on it, and you figure out it's the wrong problem. But sometimes we never figure it out. So we keep working harder and harder and harder, but nothing ever gives and nothing ever scales. We never grow. And we had gone through a period of time where customers were leaving. Our marketing that we were doing at the time didn't seem to be working. Everything just seemed to be broken. And I know every agency owner, probably any entrepreneur at some point in their career, unless they're just super lucky, goes through that time period where everything seems like it's not working. And I was blaming and complaining. I was blaming the team. I was blaming the marketing. I was blaming the economy at the time. And I was past that 2009 mark. We did really well through that. Didn't really get hit back then. But 2011 started to kind of stall a little bit. And I was getting frustrated, blaming and complaining all day long. And Charlie's the one who reset us and said, listen, I think we need to take a different approach. I think we need to refocus our efforts from the time we are attracting customers and talking about what we do to our partners, to the sales process, to the actual delivery, on delivering results, not get so focused on, am I number one on Google, or other things like impressions and other things that we all know are a waste of time and money. And we just started refocusing our efforts on what really separates us from our competition is the results we get for our clients. It's the number of new patients, since we're in the medical field, that we attract, and what those new patients turned into revenue. So how much return on investment for the $2,000 they were paying us, we're getting $30,000, $40,000 in sales relations. Instead of getting that $30,000, $40,000 in sales back in the day, people are like, yeah, but I'm not number one on Google. And so we just shifted the focus and we started saying, you know what, the number one and two ways that we measure your success: cost per lead and cost per appointment. And the reason we measure those two things is so that we could actually help them grow their practice. And this is kind of how we inched into the business development side of things, because when we got into that, we actually started helping people grow their business. And every agency owner, I think, has gotten this call: your marketing sucks. I think I'm about ready to leave. And then if you're doing the right things and you're recording the calls and tracking how many calls come in, and by the way, you can do call tracking successfully. We did it for 17 years. There's a certain way you can do it. Don't buy into the hype that you can't use call tracking numbers, because to me, we always used it against you, saying, well, they're just trying to hide their results. But when we recorded the calls and we could actually show the agent or the customers that they were getting the calls, but a lot of times they would say, your marketing stinks. And then we go listen to the calls, and then we find out, well, gosh, only 50% of your calls are being answered. And the calls that you are answering, you're completely blowing because your team doesn't seem to be having a script. Here's a script. And then I ended up developing a 14-week front desk certification program to go along with it. And so that was our first taste of it. And then people started saying, oh my gosh, thank you. You're helping me so much. This is great. I see the value. We were pushing back on, look, our job is to make the phone ring at the time. Now it's getting text messages and everything else. Your job is to take it from there. But then we found out that they were so busy running their business, they didn't have time to take it from there. So we started introducing tools to help them grow their business. And it was just a value add, but then it became part of our unique selling proposition. We're selling them like, look, most agencies are just going to send you a report monthly. The second thing we changed by focusing on their whole business was actually meeting with them live once a month. We bumped up our rates a little bit, brought all of our team in the US. I got so sick of working in the Philippines. I used to have a team of 28. I pulled everything back into the US, raised our rates a little bit. And that's when we really started to get the quality of work that I wanted. And I wasn't having to work at midnight managing a team. But when we started doing those two things, that's when we really started to grow and scale. If that answers your question.
How was your life at that time? Because there's a lot of things going on when you're growing a company. You're flying and traveling and seeing clients in their on locations. Describe a little bit of the day to day for you. How are you making that work?
I didn't know how to manage my time. I went GSD, get shit done mode. I'd wake up at 7. I'd work till 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night, ignoring. I had a wife at the time and 3-step kids. I did not make the time for them. I did not make time for myself, my health. I've always been heavy till recently. You and I talked about it before we started, where I've lost 40 pounds finally, and have a fitness competition coming up in September.
Fantastic.
So yeah, it's exciting times. But back then I ignored myself. And that's one thing that I would give back to people today is, do not ignore yourself. As hard as it is, it's one of the few regrets that I have. Now, I wouldn't be the man I am today, but I blame my wife for not understanding that I'm trying to provide for us. And she didn't really care about that. She could have lived in a trailer with me if I would have just spent more time. And the big lesson that I learned is the only ones that remember how late and how hard you worked are your kids. Now, I can't have children, but I have 3-step kids. Luckily, we've been able to salvage that relationship later in life, but it did cause a divorce and some other things. And we ended up getting to the root cause of what my problem was, where my partner was so frustrated with me. He had me to work with an ADD coach. My wife was about ready to divorce me because I kept failing to pay bills and do some just basic things, and wasn't paying attention, seemed to be working harder. I tried multiple different daily planner systems and things like that. And this is kind of one of the stories in the book as well. We figured out that it really wasn't ADHD, and it wasn't my ability to manage my time or my motivation. The ADHD coach is like, you don't seem like you have this. I think there might be something else going on. And come to find out, I had sleep apnea. And once we fixed the sleep apnea, that's when the business started to scale. But I wouldn't have had sleep apnea if I would have focused a little bit more on my health and everything else. So it was kind of double-edged sword, if you will. But once we got that fixed, everything got better. It was a little too late for the marriage, unfortunately. We're still friends today. In fact, I'm actually going to see my ex-stepdaughter next week on a trip to Atlanta. So everything worked out for the best. And we grew an incredible company and had a very successful exit. And I'm doing exactly what I want to do now.
That's wonderful. Kevin, when it came to the highs and lows of agency life, how high were the highs? And then what were some of those lows?
The highs were fantastic because, once you have a recurring model, and the other, we'll get into the story. The other thing, when we started to go high and really grow quickly, we made a significant change. We got away from the big website sales, and I'd been playing with it for about a year, and I finally started running the numbers where Charlie's like, well, maybe we should give this a shot. I think at the time I was really addicted to those $6,000 and $10,000 sales, and we were bringing on 4 to 8 clients a month. It was pretty exciting. It was good money coming in. Plus, we had our small monthly fees of the $500 to $1,500 a month for SEO, pay-per-click, whatever else we were doing. But we were still noticing that when we lost clients, and I think that I now know that after being purchased, we called it logo retention. It was either all or nothing. People were like either dumping us completely and just leaving. And so we went to what I call now an unbundled model. So we got rid of the setup fees. We changed our sales process to say, look, you either trust us or you don't. Our number one goal is not to build websites or provide you with SEO. Our number one goal is to help you grow your business. And so we created some very well-planned and well-executed templates, what we called best practice templates. We would customize it for their brand, but the websites would go live within 30 days, and we wouldn't give them any feedback. They had no feedback. In fact, we really wouldn't let them make any changes for 90 days after the website launched as part of our sales process. And if they wanted something custom, we just decided we're not the right fit, because we broke everybody into 2 buckets. This was a fascinating internal study. Once we were back, I guess back then we were about a couple hundred customers, and we had a new design person came in, and she's like, I'm just curious, let's break these folks into 2 buckets, Kevin. You'd mentioned before that your favorite clients are the ones who say, you guys are the experts, do what you want. I just want more leads. And then you had the other clients who saw that their neighbor's son who built websites in high school for the 4-H club thinks the color scheme is wrong. Even though I had people in my organization that had master's degrees in color, they seemed to know better. And what we noticed is we were getting those sites live within 30 days, and the other sites were going 6 months without even launching. So we couldn't start the marketing. We couldn't start showing them the value that we bring. And they ended up being our worst clients, and they were the ones who hated us the most out in the marketplace, because even though it was their fault, back to blind blaming, they're the ones who never got back to us. And then they blamed us when things didn't go well, because it's never their fault. So we just changed it. We went to low monthly fees that we've unbundled all the services, a few $100 a month for websites, SEO, pay-per-click, all had low management fees. And then we did something that we talked about yesterday. We got rid of our contracts. And it ended up being a real problem when we were getting ready to sell, because even the day before we closed, they're like, okay, we need to see the contracts for the customers. And we're like, my God, we told you 1,000 times we don't have contracts. And they were like, there's no way you have the attrition rates. We're pretty normal we were industry averages, nothing too great. We felt it was really great compared to our competitors, but our attrition rates were no worse than anything else. And it was a great thing to sell against, because all we said was, look, if you get wrapped into contracts, it's kind of a red flag for an agency. It means that they don't stand by their work. And we buried the competition. In fact, I didn't realize how small some of our competitors were until after, and we actually got a hold of one that was looking to sell. And I was like, oh my God, we have more case studies than they have clients. And I thought they were like this huge competitor. But we ended up signing up between 15 and 20 people a month minimum. And it just skyrocketed from there. People felt so good about no contracts that we had to get on the phone with them every month. The other change that we made, Peter, is that we actually made the people who were selling the products, they were the account managers that had to manage that account. So they were not overselling them. And we didn't pay our salespeople commission. And they took great pride in telling customers, and we just paid our salespeople $100,000, $120,000 a year. They had a great base. They made a great living, but they loved the company they were working for. And they took great pride in telling customers, look, I don't have commission. I'm recommending what I really think you need. Not only that, I'm the one that's got to take care of you in the several months going forward. So I'm not going to recommend something you don't need.
You had described to me more of I think you called it unmanagement principles.
Yeah, I'm going to give Charlie credit for that. Yeah, the unmanagement principles were just creating a relatively flat organization, hiring people that were experts, that were very intelligent and knew how to work hard, but also giving them an environment where they had some autonomy to do the work that they enjoy without all the BS that comes along with some of the hierarchical crap that we have to work with or deal with sometimes in larger companies. And it was pretty amazing. People loved it. They even the way that we structured our weekly meetings, they stopped those after a while after we sold, and people were like, gosh, we really miss our meetings. And how many times do you hear that from anyone? And we spent a lot of time structuring those meetings in a way that would make them productive, but most importantly, that people would enjoy.
It sounds like that's a common thread within the agency, which was we're giving a lot of freedom, autonomy. We want you to provide value to the client and be responsible for that client staying with us because there's no contract binding them to us. That's a lot of trust to give to the team. And how big did the team get?
23, I believe, is what we had when we sold. So decent size for us. I think they were doing the work because as I went to work for the agency that brought mine and looking at other agencies that we looked, they were twice the size of us for the revenue they had. I was shocked. I was like, that's a lot of people. What are they doing? So it was pretty amazing what we did. And I'll give Charlie a lot of the credit because I was the sales guy. I did a great job of traveling all over the country, being the face of the company. I was the expert, the practice development specialist. Charlie's the one who put together the team and built it from behind. So I think it's important if you do have a partner to clearly define your roles, which we did. I stayed out of his lane. He stayed out of mine, and we made it work.
When did people start knocking on your door? Because that's coming.
Yeah.
When you get to that size and you're that out there and that much of a public figure.
Yeah. And I think this one's okay to share because before, when I got to about $1 million a year in revenue, this was years and years ago, I was pretty happy. I was still young, in my 30s. And I thought about selling. I'd had a bad couple of days, which is when we all think about selling, is when things suck or you have a bad couple of customers, which don't let it get to you. They'll keep coming, but you got to focus on the people who love you and trust you and want you to make it. They're usually the ones who pay you the most, by the way. But yeah, I had a broker and he did the valuation. I think at the time it was like worth 1.2 million. And I was excited, and he's like, well, let me ask you a question. What are you going to do after you sell? Long pause. And I looked at it. I was like, well, I don't know. And he said, look, I can't take you on as a client. I'm like, what? He goes, I'm not selling your business. You need to stick with this and grow it and scale it and figure out a way to get to larger numbers until you figure out if there's something else you want to do. Because I can still tell that you love what you're doing. I know you had a bad couple of customers, and I know the $1 million seems like a lot of money right now, but it's really not after taxes and with the economy the way it was back then. Don't do it. And it was the best advice I got. But that's when we started getting the calls. But as we started getting larger and doing some more stuff on LinkedIn and some of my talks and things like that were starting to go viral a little bit, we started to get calls from investment bankers and brokers and private equity groups saying, hey, if you ever get ready to sell, let us know. And we were like, no. And Charlie's getting the same hits on LinkedIn. This would have probably been 15 years into it, a few years ago. 2019, I think, is when we first started getting. And we were like, no, we're doing really well. Why would we sell? I mean, we work 7:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. We have an incredible team. Our customers are extremely happy. We're not even looking. And then after another year or so, I started thinking, well, gosh, why don't we just hear what they have to say? And we had one broker come in and give us a quote on what they would sell it for. I was like, not really worth it. It's not even 5 years of income. Plus they wanted like a $5,000 a month retainer, which for me, being a broker for medical practices, I never took a retainer. If I didn't sell the practice, I didn't get any money. And I kind of had that stuck in my head. I wouldn't mind a down payment, but I definitely wasn't going to pay somebody else as an employee to go out and sell the business. And then about a year went by after that, and we had another broker approach us who just took a completely different approach. You may or may not be ready to sell, but I'd still love to see what your business is worth. And he valued it at a certain amount. We were like, wow, that sounds exciting. And he didn't want the monthly retainer, and he had it sold within a year. And that's kind of the quick story. It was a life-changing amount. I can't get into how much, as we talked about already, but it was great. And then the company allowed me to stay on with them for 3 years, which is just about to end here in about 6 months. And I had a great time with them, and everything they said would happen has come true.
Walk us through these valuations you're getting from brokers, because brokers are incentivized to get a piece of that. What did you believe? What did you not believe? What did you learn from getting your business valued, and what changes you have to make to get really prepared for it?
Yeah, well, we've been preparing for 4 or 5 years before. We weren't necessarily preparing to sell. We were just trying to run a better business. So for the last 4 or 5 years, we had been clearly documenting everybody's, not only their jobs and what they did, and have some systems and processes behind it, but along with their most valuable activities, their measurements of success for each member of the organization. And all of our processes, procedures were documented. Our onboarding for new customers, not only new customers, of course, but onboarding for new team members was really dialed out. Even our practice advisors, new employees that we brought on, they were very highly trained in what we called the certification program, something I still teach for other businesses now that work with me as a coach. But that is what we prepared for, and that's what made us so attractive. So if you don't have those systems and processes and documentations and you think you ever want to sell, get them down on paper. I recommend you, if there's a book called Buy Back Your Time that I mentioned already, in chapter 7 talks about how to create playbooks. That's the best thing I can give people. Go out and get that book. Look at chapter 7. He tells you exactly how to create all the systems and duplicatable processes you need to bring on people quickly and get them up to speed pretty fast, and make sure things are done right. So, basically what we found was it was very clear that the first few valuations that we had done were from brokers who were just get them in, get them out. Get them in. I want to price it in a way that I know will sell tomorrow and I'll have 100 buyers. But when we had this other broker, then when we showed him some of the others that we had done, he's like, oh yeah, I know these 3 people. They like to sell within 30 days. I'm like, that's funny. That's what they promised me. He's like, oh yeah, you would totally sell that quickly at this price. And so that was a valuable lesson for me because I'd never thought about it. It was a decent amount of money, but Charlie and I were partners 50-50. So when you divide it in two, it wasn't a lot of money, not the money that I wanted to be done. I mean, why would we sell? We were doing quite well and working a normal work week with the occasional travel for my talks. And we had a great reputation. It wasn't until we had a certain amount that came available that we're like, well, geez, if that can happen, let us know. But we do want to make sure it's the right company because we actually got it down to 3 different companies. One company gave us the feeling they were just going to come out, clean house of the people that we wanted to stay on board. And I'll get to that why in a minute, and just didn't like that. The other one just didn't have the best feeling. We went with our gut because I don't know, this guy doesn't seem like he's very reputable, and he's talking more about numbers instead of developing his team. And we knew that we couldn't have gotten to where we were without the team members that we brought along. And that was one of the reasons we picked the company we did, because the first part of their letter of intent, about the first 4 pages, was how they plan to use our team as an example and promote team members that show that they can do the work into other divisions. Because we were actually starting to lose people because there was nowhere else for them to go within our organizations. You're paying me a lot of money and I love it, but I want that VP position. I want to get some more experience. We lost like our head of SEO to Verizon that was going to pay her $250,000 a year with equity. Well, crap, we can't match that, but we lost. It was a huge hole for a bit. We figured it out and made it, but we were actually starting to lose people that didn't have a career path. As much as some of the people that had grown up that were making $100,000, $120,000, $150,000 within the organization, which I was very proud of, they just still had nowhere to go.
Yeah. And that's an important opportunity when you get to sell a business.
Yeah. And we were really happy with where we were, because I think our shining moment was during COVID. This is one of the biggest things that I'm most proud of in my career. Charlie and I did really well at taking the amount of money that we wanted out of the business, but socking the rest away. So we had a treasure chest that was quite large as far as cash in the bank. And when COVID hit, about 3 months into the shutdown, people were getting really nervous and freaking out. And I was like, Charlie, we got to talk to them. We got to tell them what's up. But we got on the phone. We had planned out what we were going to say. And we said, all right, listen, guys, Charlie and I have saved for a rainy day. We can continue to pay everyone their full salary, including us, for a year. We think it's going to be temporary, but I just want you to know nobody's in danger of losing their job. And then if we need to, after a year, Charlie and I will not take a salary for 6 months, because we've also saved on a personal level and can survive. So that's 18 months where you'll be at your full salary. And if there's still something going on after 18 months, we're still going to do our best to keep everybody on board. Then we might ask for a salary reduction. We didn't let one person go. We got a little money that we used to make up for the money that we lost during the shutdown, but it wasn't a lot. And that was probably one of my proudest moments. And we actually grew like $20,000 that year in revenue. So we were very proud of that small amount of growth, considering everybody else left, because we were able to show people. And that also proved that we were recession proof as an organization in the field that we were in. And I think a lot of our customers learned very quickly that the last thing they should shut off is their digital marketing. Because if they do, and there were some people that did, it was really interesting to see the people that shut everything down and how hard it was for us to get them back, were other people that said, no, everybody's shutting down. Let's go harder. Keep everything at the same. And it was fascinating to see how much they grew after that COVID experience. But that was really fun.
The number one response in turbulent times is strategic growth. And to have people cut off mechanisms of growth, it's very hard to recover. What do you think led you to, you described some of the attributes. What are the other attributes of the offer that you accepted that made it the right offer for you, at least the instinct and gut reaction to it? Is the treatment of the team and the vision?
Yesterday, we got the majority of our money up front. I'm not a fan of earnouts. I know some people are. It just was, as a broker, it's something I never did. I know a lot of people have done very successful earnouts. It was just not something that we wanted to do. So we did negotiate that. We got all of our money up front, plus positions in the company going forward, which worked out pretty well as well. Obviously, it wasn't what we were making as agency owners, but it was a decent amount, and we got to have some input on what was going to take that company to the next level. So that's what we did, and we got a little piece of the new company. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not, but we did.
And it's common. It's not uncommon for that to be some level of incentive or upside or contribution. So let's touch on that briefly. They say, okay, well, you have no contracts, Kevin, and you're going to want the lump sum of your purchase consideration up front. You've done brokerage before, and for a lot of the market, people say that, we're buying the contracts and the future expectations of those clients staying. So net revenues, the retention of that. How did you get them to be okay with that?
Yeah, great question. We were able to show that over the last 7 or 8 years, the attrition was never any worse. I never had contracts. I just never did. And I kept telling brokers, are like, wait, you don't have contracts? I'm like, no, seriously, we don't have contracts. Then, during the due diligence, they're like, okay, where's your contracts? And we're like, damn it, we don't have contracts. Well, how's your attrition this low? We do a good job. And so the way we got through it was to prove to them, and we finally just said, guys, make a decision, because you can see our attrition is no worse. It's no worse than anybody. And we think it's actually better from what we're reading. And so what we did was we had to go back and pull. Infusionsoft was a little difficult for logo loss versus just service loss, but that goes back to our unbundling. So we were able to show that our logo loss was actually much lower without contracts, because when we unbundled everything, back to what helped us with attrition and when we started to scale, then people, when we would add a service like add pay-per-click, but it didn't work out that well, they would just cancel the pay-per-click and say, well, that didn't work that well, but I love whatever the other I love your SEO, love the website, love the review builder. Can we just keep that? Absolutely. So when they really started digging deep and they saw that our logo loss wasn't really bad at all, it was actually great, and that we were still maintaining clients even when they had 1 or 2 services they weren't happy with, that's when they started to say, okay, this is real. These guys are the real deal.
Yeah, that's
the numbers, but the numbers don't lie. There's what feels good and there's numbers, and the numbers didn't lie.
Yeah. It's a great reminder for the marketplace that reviewing financial statements is not as useful as viewing a client by client or logo by logo lifetime value.
Yeah.
The fact that that's how you presented the business, because the financial statements are the financial statements, but having the proof of this client paying you for this many years and being committed to you is more valuable than the contract.
Yep. And I will give our broker credit for that, because I had to pull every single invoice that I'd ever billed since 2009. It was a pain in the ass. Actually, it wasn't that bad, because the broker done a lot of the work before, and we had really strong, there's very little that we ran through the company. So there was very few add backs. Actually, the financial piece of the whole thing of the due diligence went actually pretty smoothly. And within a few weeks, we were done. The HR and the tech stack, that was a little different, because there was some HIPAA compliant, disagreements we had, and getting the 2 organizations to pay the same way and things like that, because we paid our people very well. Those were some sticking points, but nothing major. We obviously made it through it, or I wouldn't be sitting here on your show.
How long was the process then? So you had 3 offers. You selected the one that had the best vision for the team.
We hired the broker. It took about a year to complete, and they did the confidential. They called them SIPs, confidential
information memorandums or private placements. All those. Yep.
Yeah, something like that. So we did that, which was interesting, because Charlie and I actually tried to sell it ourselves before. We had some interested manufacturers, and we started going to them, and a couple of CEOs that would have been very much in their interest, because we were selling a lot of their products with a lot of their customers, and they were very interested. But when I went back and I was like, yeah, we got a broker, and I was like, oh man, good. I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but you were missing a lot of stuff that we really needed to see. And I was like, okay, so selling medical practices is different than selling much larger digital marketing agency. And he was super happy for us. We didn't end up selling to the manufacturer, but we went back to them, and they just couldn't seem to make the numbers work that we were looking for and what it was worth in the market. So it took about 6 months to actually find the company that wanted to buy us. Our broker was great. He gave us weekly updates. He was showing us who he emailed and who had responded and what their next meetings were and what the next steps were. Once we had interested parties, he would actually go back and find out who was actually backing them to make sure that we weren't going to get screwed after the deal, So he found out that they had some pretty big backers, and we had those 3 offers and narrowed it down to 1. And after we talked to the CEO of this one company, we're like, we really like you. Might be a little less, but we like what you guys have to offer.
How much of a commitment was signing the LOI? Like, did you think, okay, this is a major step to being done at some point? Or were you kind of like, we'll sign the LOI and it goes to the next stage?
No, we were
Tire
ready. We were
kicking.
very happy with the offer they had. I mean, we went back and forth and we did push back a little bit and they came back with better offers. We were very happy. We were excited and we were ready to get to work. I think the due diligence, it was 3, 4 months, and then it took a couple months just to close. And we had a little hiccup. About a week before we were supposed to close, the government that had waited 5 years to pass this, they passed a law 5 years ago. And then like the week before we were supposed to close, came out with their guidelines for that law. And they took it as very negative. So it ended up pushing our closing out for a week. We had to kind of break our rules and say, look, you need to talk to a couple of our happy clients, and they'll tell you that this is not the biggest threat to our profession. The biggest threat is what we've been telling you before, which was managed care and some other stuff, not this one thing. And so it was really stressful because I'm like, oh my God, we're about to cross the finish line and the whole thing's gonna be blown. And it ended up working out and we got through it. Once the private equity group talked to a few of our customers that told them straight up, look, this is not the threat. I think you guys are buying. And then they told them how much they loved us and how great a company they're buying, and they're excited. So
If we could go back in time and prep you, Kevin, for this process, what do you think we should be telling you? What would have been useful to know that surprised you throughout this deal?
I didn't really have any surprises. Our broker was great. Everything he said would happen, happened. He was funny because I've been a broker. That helped, I think, because I'm usually the one having to coach the business owners. Like, look, it's going to suck for about 3 months. They're going to ask for stuff multiple times. They're going to ask you for things even the day before you're supposed to close that you've already given them. It's just some being counter having to check off a box. Don't stress. So it was actually pretty easy because I knew it was going to happen. I don't think there's anything I'd go back and tell myself at that time. The only thing I would tell myself when I started my agency is don't let your business get ahead of your health and your family. That's two things that I blew.
So you were still active in the business, or did you have succession and you were out of business development for the agency when you started the sell process?
Well, they pulled me out of the founder, and I think my title was Chief Business Development Officer. And they moved me to a senior position in the company, sales and marketing, while they were looking for other people. It was supposed to be temporary, just a 2 to 3 year deal. And then the last year I stepped back and they knew about my book, and they've been very kind and they know this is what I want to do. It's in no way competitive for them. And so they were very nice to put it in our final documents. Like, we have no problem with this book, and even some other things that I still do in the medical profession. Because we have these mastermind groups that we run. These are higher end mastermind groups that people pay 25 and 50 grand and 100 grand to be part of. And as long as we're recommending them a digital marketing partner, which we do, they don't mind if I do things like that. So they've been very nice to let me continue to make a living, do some things that I'm passionate about.
Great. Did the due diligence process disrupt the business at all? Because often you hear that the warning from brokers in the industry.
Yeah, and they knew that. I mean, I wouldn't say we didn't have a huge drop or a huge increase in people leaving at all. Our focus wasn't there. I wasn't able to do a couple talks that I normally do and some other things. But for the most part, we did what I was recommending to customers, and we ran that business until the day we had a check. Like, it was still going to be ours until the day we had checks in our hands or money in the bank. So we continued to push hard. But remember, I also had a big team behind us. So I already pulled back on a lot of the selling and things like that, because we had a good, I think, 3 or 4 team members that were really good at their jobs and were doing a great job. And I only had my few core clients who I continued to talk to. Some of the bigger clients have been with me since the very beginning. So we didn't see a huge disruption in our operations. We were a pretty well-oiled machine, which was another great point that they had found a great company to bring on board to their portfolio.
In our prep, you had mentioned CRM being one of those aha moments too. And I don't think we gave its just highlight here. So we mentioned Infusionsoft came in, and that was part of like the systemization of the business that created the opportunity for you to exit. So maybe explain that.
Yeah. So when I first started, I don't remember what we were using back then. It was kind of a hodgepodge between like one shopping cart. I'm totally dating myself now. Weber for the email marketing system that we had. I think we were using one shopping cart to process credit cards. It was just kind of a hodgepodge of systems. And when Infusionsoft first came out, that was kind of like their claim to fame, everything in one place. which we loved, but I waited 2 more years before I implemented it. And I wish I wouldn't have. I really believe that we would have been twice the size that we were. And as I said, we got pretty large if I would have invested in an automation CRM system before. And I like all-in-one. If you can find something that's all-in-one instead of on a hodgepodge, it'll definitely make your tech stack due diligence much easier when you go through that, because we'd still had some of our other systems that we were using. So it made that part a little difficult as well. But Infusionsoft, with all the automation, because we ended up starting to use it for some of our onboarding as well, we automated some things there. Was still a pretty big human element. We were pretty hands-on because we figured out that our customers just seemed to like that. I think that's another lesson. We had a scheduler who scheduled calls for us. We had our automated things that we would send out. I'm going to tell you about 80% of the clients would rather work with Christina, who still works for me today, than using one of the automated systems. In fact, when we did some surveys, people are like, God, I can't stand when people just say, send me your link. And you know what? It still bugs me today. I can't stand it either, because I have Christina. I give people a choice. Hey, look, Christina will find us some time. And people seem to like that much better. They seem like it's hands-on. I think we're losing a lot of the customer support and customer service that people still want today, because we're getting so much into AI. And I get it. AI is getting there, and we'll have automated support and things like that. We actually have some AI things that we're playing around with that I know the agency's working on and that we're playing around with too. But don't forget that people still like to work with human beings.
You exited, you got to stay with the company, the buyer, for a period of time, and then you anticipated kind of a career after. You're not sitting on a beach in Costa Rica.
That's a good story too. That's actually in my book. So the day we closed, came home, I went and got my one stupid midlife crisis purchase, called my financial guy, and I'm like, can I go get it? He's like, yeah, Kev, you can go get your car. So I went to the dealership and picked up the Lambo, got an Urus, and came home and had a small group of people with a bottle of champagne and a really expensive bottle of wine that I bought, saying if I ever sold, this is what we're drinking. And during that little party, I'm pointing at the room we were in because it was in the house in the wine cellar. And they were like, well, what's next? And I was like, well, shit, I don't know. I've been doing this for a year, and I kind of thought I was going to be done. They're like, Kevin, you're only 50 years old. You're not done. I know you. And I'm like, well, that's a great question. It really bothered me. So after everybody left and came back in the office, and I saw a little TED Talk book on the book, and I was like, well, that'd be a good challenge. So started reading that. And then I found a group who specializes in helping people secure TED Talks. And I knew and they actually help you find a topic to talk about. So I joined that group. We went through like this really long exercise about all my life lessons, and settled on a story when I was 10 years old playing baseball, and I had a 550 batting average back then, which is, for those of you who don't know anything about baseball, that's pretty phenomenal. Babe Ruth in his heyday had a 394. And so we were being approached, and people were telling my dad, you got to develop this kid. He's got some talent, high school, college, maybe even the pros. We see this all the time, and you're identified at this age. So guess what Dad went? He went to work, and we started working on mindset, my swing, and everything else for that entire off season. Next season, I stepped up to bat, and I started striking out. And I kept striking out to where I had a 0 batting average at the end of that season. I literally went from 0 to 0. And then after I quit baseball and had enough, I got an eye exam, and they just said, sorry, kid's blind, you can't see. So it wasn't anything about my attitude, my swing. I just couldn't see the ball. And so they helped me come up with a topic. We called it blind blaming. That's where you think you know what the problem is. Sometimes it's out of your control, because at no point during that time with those adults did they stop blaming me for something that was really out of my control. And I see it in agencies, I see it in business, I see it in life, I see it in relationships. And so we crafted this TED Talk, and then I started sharing it with my podcast people that I do as well. And a lot of these famous authors were saying, man, this would make a great book. And the last thing in the world I wanted to do was write another book. But then we wrote the book, and it's kind of taken off. So it's kind of given me something else to do and something that I'm passionate about. And it's actually not so niched out. It's something that actually applies to everybody, which is very different for me. In fact, I recently went back to Russell Brunson because I joined his inner circle, which is much more than $5,000 these days. But I got the chance to pitch the idea of blind blaming to him and the book Beyond Blind Blaming. And he loved it. He's like, Kevin, I know 20 years ago, I recommended you go deep, just like David Fry did. But now I'm telling you, this is something that applies to everybody. And I think you should go as wide as you can. And so he's helped me again with the business model and the stuff we're doing behind the book. So it's given me a sense of purpose. And these mastermind groups where we're getting a lot of people together and we're sharing ideas of what's working, what's not. It's a different type of person in the room. These are multi-million-dollar business owners.
It's a very different vocation.
Yeah, very different vocation. Very different than agencies. It's more transformational than transactional. But I still get to coach and do some things there. So anyway, that's the short story long of what's happened since we sold. But it's been an interesting 2.5 years. 3 years is coming up here at the end of summer.
It sounds like this post-agency chapter, You found a vocation that fills your cup. You've gotten a handle on your personal physical self. Does it feel different?
It feels different. I think I'm happier. We went out this week. We were in Houston for 3 days with women owners that I've known for 20 years. Every single one of them, every single night this week said, you are such a different person now. Even in the last year, you have changed so much. So yeah, I'm very happy, a lot happier. I've got a great relationship so far. We're a year in. We made it a year. But she seems to be very happy. I'm very happy. But I am also practicing a lot of things that I never did. She's like, what I love about you is you keep doing the things you did in the beginning. And what was really funny is I've always told her, listen, if I keep doing the things I do in the beginning, there'll never be an end. And we're at Funnel Hacking Live together because I wanted her to experience Tony Robbins and things like that. And Tony's like 2 feet from us. I swear to God, he goes, if you keep doing the things you do in the beginning, there will never be an end. And she looks at me like, really? And I'm like, yeah, he keeps stealing my shit. I don't know what's going on. He does that to me all the time. And she started laughing. So yeah, very happy. Lost 40 pounds, got a fitness journey I'm on. I have actually learned to make time for myself, even around this new business, which is a lot. We've got the podcast, we've got the book, we've got an e-course, we've got live events we're doing. I've got a media tour that I'm about to start with about 70 meetings, but I don't miss workouts or eating healthy or time with Jen. Because I went from like me, debauchery, no responsibilities, single man for 10 years, decent amount of money, to having a girlfriend with 4 children and 4 grandkids. So instead of me drinking wine on Friday afternoons, I usually have like a birthday party or babysitting duties. So it's very different life now, but all in good ways.
From that current position and knowing what you know now, how do you advise an entrepreneur who's yet to get there? Because a lot of times it's hard for them to see themselves in you. And like, of course, Kevin, you have all this time. You sold, you got out of your business. You can focus on these things. I'm still in the grind. What do you tell them?
I would say focus on creating the great experience with their customers and you'll start having fun again. When we started really focusing on changing our sales process and getting known for results we never got rid of contracts because we never had them, but we just did some things that were really against the grain to give us a unique selling proposition. That's when it started to get really fun. And I miss it, some of it. I miss some of the customers and they miss me from what I've heard. But it's just a different focus now in my career. So I would say don't give up. It's hard to beat someone who never quits. Don't get so down on yourself that you sell too early. I see a lot of agency owners that are exiting too quickly, when if they just would have read, like, Buy Back Your Time is probably the biggest book that I would recommend after mine. Shameless plug. Actually, my book's great, but his book is fantastic. Buy Back Your Time is probably, if I wish I would have read that years ago, because I think that would have made a significant difference in my ability to run my business. I've turned it on to my trainers and everybody else who have had some significant success from reading that one book. So just focus on the things that are in that book, because he talks about how to run your business better. This is like the E-Myth on steroids. I don't know if you remember that book. It's an old one. The E-Myth is a book, and that's another great book, E-Myth Revisited. All he talks about in the book, I'll save you the read. It is still a good read to have. Just because you're good at doing something does not mean you will be good at running a business that does that work. And if you're burned out or you're frustrated or you're not seeing the scale, there's probably a couple things that happen. First of all, you're not in the right mindset. So if you need some help with your identity or mindset or getting rid of that ceiling, another book, I'm an avid reader if you couldn't tell, is called The Mountain Is You. And it talks a lot about how we self-sabotage ourselves in business and in life. And if you're really frustrated and you've reached a certain threshold next and you want more time with less stress, buy back your time. And if you're still stuck and you're not really sure where to go, that's when I would recommend Beyond Blind Blaming. So I would recommend being an avid reader, because if you've got a problem, it's not going to happen on TikTok videos. You're not going to find the solution. You might, and there's a lot of people who disagree with me there, but I think more often than not, if they can start reading or listening to audio tapes and learn as much as you can about creating a scalable business and the right mindset to get there, because the worst thing that can happen is that your business outgrows your personal development. And that's what happened to me. And when I got that fixed, plus the sleep apnea, everything took off. So does that help?
It does. And your book, Beyond Blind Blaming, is providing tactics for common issues that owners face.
It is.
Where can they go to get a copy? And if they are so inclined to learn more about what you have going on, Kevin, how best can they reach out to you?
I'm available on LinkedIn. You can search for Kevin St. Clergy. I'm on Instagram at Kevin St. Clergy. Blindblaming.com is our website. And then Kevin@blindblaming.com. You're welcome to email me personally. You'll definitely hear from either me or my assistant, Christina, right away, but I'd love to hear from you. Kevin@blindblaming.com, or blindblaming.com has all the things we're we're doing now, including the book. You can get a free copy of the book, just pay the shipping and handling, go through a few sales pages with some other things we're offering. But if you don't have the $10 or you're going through a tough time and you would just like a free book, just email me and I will send you a free copy.
Kevin, great resource for the market. I appreciate you. And again, thank you for revealing a story that I wish more and more people told. That your journey is one that faced headwinds, struggles, personal, professional, and you made it out to what many would seem as the promised land. And the fact that you're making yourself available to entrepreneurs to share that journey so they can replicate that and experience it on their own is truly invaluable. So thank you, Kevin.